Hey there, good evening. Nice to see everybody. It is time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors, journalists, all different people who put stuff out in the Bronx so you can get some insight into what they do. And in our second segment, we're going to talk about a beautiful, absolutely spectacular mural that has a lot of objectives over there in the Northwest Bronx. But right now, let's say good evening to Karen Yee, who covers homelessness and poverty for WNYC and Gothamist. Karen, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Gary.
Nice to have you with us. Let's get right to it. The homeless situation in New York City, I don't know how to carry it. So puzzling, so difficult, so heart-wrenching in some cases. But this was interesting. You wrote a story that said that the headline was, "It's harder for New York City homeless families without young kids to get shelter beds," the data shows. Talk to me about, so basically, if you have kids, you're going to be less likely to get space in a shelter. This is what the article says, right?
Right. The reason I wanted to focus on this population is that there's been so much attention on migrant families seeking shelter and migrant families with children seeking shelter, right? And those are sort of the images we see on the media. But really, there's a smaller segment of the homeless population we're talking about, which is adult families. And these are, in many cases, couples, husband and wife, or sometimes an older adult taking care of a parent, and they also need shelter. They make up a smaller percentage of the overall city's homeless population, but they face much more challenges because the rates of disability in this population are very high. A lot of these folks are coming from street homelessness, and they're having to sort of jump through hoops to prove their homelessness, right? To prove where they were living in the last year. And if you were living on the street, there's no paperwork for that. And so I found it really interesting that these families in particular are more vulnerable and having a hard time getting shelter because they're having to reapply time and time again, in some cases up to 6 times, to say, hey, I really need a place to stay.
You and I were just talking before we went on the air about the homeless population of people who are have mental challenges, and when you were just talking about the people who are adults and maybe they're a little older and maybe their homelessness is more ingrained, shall we say, in their personage, I think also, and this is purely a guess, that many of these people, because of the years of dealing with this impossible problem, may also have mental challenges, and that compounds the issue for everyone involved, for the city, the government, and for the population, and of course for the people themselves. What is there some sympathy for the city that the shelters are bursting and that it's horrible, but they have to do priorities, and if they look at children who are more vulnerable and less able to fend for themselves, maybe that is appropriate. I say that hesitantly. Maybe that is appropriate to prioritize it that way.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, you don't really have in New York City, because of the right to shelter law, right, which guarantees people who ask for a shelter bed the right to a shelter bed. You don't have the sort of tent cities that we see out in the West Coast and sort of the fight that those states are having. And you don't see children sleeping on the street in New York, right? And then that is a credit to the history here of activism and homeless advocates really pushing to sort of make that the law of the land here. And yes, the Adams administration has had to deal with an incredible influx of migrant families seeking shelter, right? And you haven't really seen sort of the street homelessness or migrants sleeping in the street yet, right? Because the administration has really expanded its capacity to house these families. But, to be clear, the adult families that I'm talking about, they have different shelters, right? There are different spaces depending on the makeup of your family. If you are a single adult, you go to a certain shelter. If you are a family with young kids, you go to a different kind of shelter. And if you are an adult family, you go to a different shelter, right? So we're talking about different processes and different requirements that are asked when people ask for shelter. So I think, to give the Adams administration credit, they have said that, the Department of Homeless Services, which oversees the process for screening all sorts of families into homeless shelters, they've been inundated. They were inundated with having to grapple with migrant families arriving and coming off the heels of COVID, right? The pandemic happened.
Yep.
They opened up a new process to allow people to apply remotely. So there are many, many challenges. And I found that families are having to reapply. 15% of families are having to reapply up to 6 times, right? That's been higher
Wow.
and higher in previous administrations. And so something that the Adams administration told me is like, look, we've gotten it down, right? We've gotten it down significantly, but it's just never been a good picture. Right? It's always been a problem, particularly for these families. And that's something that I wanted to highlight, right? Because
Which you
these are the
certainly
families,
did, yeah.
yeah, that tend to be, living on the street. And we are seeing a 15-year high in street homelessness rates as well as like you mentioned, the shelters sort of bursting.
I'm just gonna quote from your article. Stats from mid 2017 through the first half of the year show that adult families were denied shelter 75% of the time on average. And you just quoted something that I had not heard, that they have to apply 6 times or more or whatever. That's insane, especially for people who don't have a place to bed down and sleep and sit in front of their laptop and apply. The worst rejection rates were topped 80% were in 2022 and 23. You know these because you wrote this. Families with children were denied 64% of the time on average in the same period. So it's not been a picnic for those folks as well. One thing I want to ask you, where does the latent rule that the administration put forward that limited stay for 30 and 60 days, where does that come in? That if you've been in there 30 days and 60 days, depending on who you are and what your families are like, I just can't imagine, like, what are we supposed to do after? I mean, presumably during that time, they are looking for housing, but goodness knows there are reasons that many of these people are homeless. So where does that whole thing fall? And if I recall correctly, the city council was challenging that rule. Mm-hmm. Where are we at? Maybe you can help us all here on that.
Right. So like I mentioned, New York City is sort of unique because it has this right to shelter rule, right? Which is why the city and the Adams administration was sort of housing all of these migrants, because under its rule, if you ask for shelter and you need it, you have to be given a bed, right? Right. And so with this 30 and 60-day rule, that was a court agreement reached by the parties to say, if you are essentially a migrant adult here, you can be limited to 30 or 60 days in the shelter that the city has provided for you. And that's the first time really that we're seeing the city put these sort of restrictions on this decree that has existed, right, for 40 plus years.
Yes,
and
but I have to interject, but that conflicts with the original concept that
correct.
Anybody who asks for shelter gets provided.
Yes, absolutely.
You can finish, but I just had to say that it flies in the face of that consideration. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right, absolutely. So you're now limiting adults to a month or two in shelter, right? And we know on average it takes families a year plus to be able to work their way out of shelter, right? You need to be able to maybe find a job, maybe get a down payment, find a broker's fee. Like, we know how expensive housing is in the city. And so it takes families a significant amount of time. Now add to that you are new to this country, maybe don't speak the language, and may or may not have a work permit or any legal way of working.
May not know the difference between Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx and Queens, for that matter.
Right. Your only point of reference. Yeah.
Hello, I was just bust here,
Yep. Yeah. So that I think we're still seeing play out. So you're right that we're now limiting those populations. And so in the cases of adult families, they will have these time restrictions on them unless they can prove that they are working toward getting out of shelter. And there's like a list of
so that's
things.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I want to move on because there is that other article I do want to talk about. But I think about myself. If my wife and I wanted to move, it would take me more than a month to really find a place to move, et cetera. And I have all the resources available and even contacts of people that I know, et cetera. People in shelters, you're saying, get it done. Woo, good luck. Do you have in your mind a solution to this problem, or is this a vexing problem and you just reported on it?
I mean, I think this is incredibly complicated, right? I think
yes.
one way that advocates have told me, is particular to going back to the adult family problem is, can we find a way? Like, the reason people have to apply 6 times is the DHS, according to the advocates, can apply discretion on the 6th attempt, right? Or after the 5th attempt, they can say, well, I see you're working toward proving you know, where you lived in the last year, you don't quite meet the requirements, but we're going to grant you shelter because you're sort of working in that direction to, like, in good faith prove
Right.
it. So one of the more simple solutions, right, and obviously this is a very complicated problem with multiple solutions required, is to maybe move up that discretion maybe the second time or the third time or even the fourth time, right?
I
That
see.
is something that was proposed, saying clearly no one
And
wants to go to shelter, right? And this is sort of a last ditch effort from
right.
families who are seeking, you know, to no longer live on the street in many
And
cases.
on that note, I want to express some sympathy for the people who have to make those horrible judgments, because I'm sure they would rather say, "Oh, we got a place for you for as long as you want," but of course they have to make these very difficult judgments.
Right.
I want to go from kind of bad news to good news,
Okay.
and that is, you wrote a story that said low-income Bronx families get free childcare for young children at 6 new centers. We have to thank Grand Street Settlement. I understand we have to thank Congressman Richie Torres for funding it. But tell us what that good news is, because when we hear about more childcare, free childcare, we do a check mark. That's a good thing.
Yes, childcare is a huge affordability issue across the city. It is particularly an issue in the Bronx. You know, this statistic was interesting and shocking to me, that the federal guidelines say families should not spend more than 7% of their household's income on childcare costs. New Yorkers spend way over that, and families in the Bronx can spend up to 50 to 60% of their household income on childcare for one child, right? So you have a very concentrated problem in the Bronx. And now you have Head Start coming in. Head Start is a really sort of fascinating federally funded program that caters to children 0 to 5. And
It's
it's
a
more than,
wonderful program.
yeah,
I'm allowed to editorialize. It's a wonderful program, and I want Head Start everywhere. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. And I think that what makes it different is it's not just sort of caring for the child, but it's caring for sort of health and education and looking at the family. So it's like wraparound holistic services. They offer longer hours than traditional childcare. And again, this is completely free to families if you qualify. So there are income restrictions. You have to make less than a certain threshold. And then, you know, you kind of stay with the program until you're ready for kindergarten. That's the purpose of it, right?
We've got to do it. That's how our kids are going to listen. My mom was a nursery school teacher, so you know where my heart is.
Yeah.
But you know what you wrote about $18.4 million from the federal government. Again, I interviewed Richie Torres this week, as a matter of last week, and he was very proud of that and was very clear about why this is so vital. So let's see, 6 new Head Start sites in the Bronx. Where if I could stand up and applaud, I would give it a standing ovation. Listen, Karen Yee from WNYC Gothamist, thank you so much. We need you so badly, because if we don't have you, we'll all be going, what the heck is going on out there? But that's why we have you and David and all my friends over there at WNYC Gothamist. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you around town. We'll be reading everything you write, and we'll get you back here at some point.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you. There we go. Karen Yee from WNYC Gothamist. And when we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, wait till you see this beautiful mural that was just painted in the Bronx for environmental reasons. As a matter of fact, don't go away. Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I said this was a good news segment, a wonderful segment. And when you see how beautiful this mural is in the borough of the Bronx, you're going to be excited. Let's bring on the executive director of KRVC, Kingsbridge, Riverdale, and Van Cortlandt. It is my buddy, Laura Levine-Pinedo. Always good to see you, Laura.
Hi, Gary. Always great to see you as well.
And along with her, is Mr. Sokol Delaj. Mr. Delaj, you have the corner hair salon, right? Delaj Hair Studios, right next to, around the corner from where KRVC is on 236th Street.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. Laura, anybody who goes onto West 236th Street will walk by and see this absolutely spectacularly gorgeous mural. Let's see, it is called For the Birds. It is by an artist named Nicky Enright. Laura, tell us a little bit about this mural and why does Gary think it's so beautiful?
There's Nicky Enright.
Oh, there's Nicky. Wow, right on time.
Hello.
Hi, Nicky. We're now joined by the artist himself. It is Nicky Enright. So, Laura, let's get going. Tell us about this mural. We're going to talk about it. We're going to show it and everything else.
Yeah, so the mural is called For the Birds. It is by Nicky Enright. We will let Nicky speak a little bit more about how it came to be. Sokol Delaj always had a vision for a mural since he moved into that space. And it was a collaborative work of the three entities to make it happen. And we're just very excited that Riverdale has a community mural that they can appreciate and that they've grown to love.
I think it goes to your credit. You were recently appointed the executive director of KRVC, but I think we're all applauding that.
Oh, thank you.
But Laura, your thing is really to bring people together, and in this case, unstated so far is the Audubon Society, which was squarely behind this. So congratulations for putting it together. I guess in some levels it was an easier thing than some of the other things you work on because you had a lot of people who really wanted to do it.
Right. Well, I do have to give credit to Tracy Shelton. It was a collaborative effort between my predecessor and myself to receive and execute this grant. So Tracy did apply for this grant. She did get it. And then starting in December, I was in charge of the execution, sort of like the project manager. So it was just a no-brainer. I think art just makes everyone happy. It brings everyone together, and it's just really part of our mission and what we represent. And it's beautiful.
I think it changes people's attitudes toward their community, toward the Bronx, et cetera, et cetera. Before we bring in Nicky to talk about the specifics, Mr. Delaj, tell us a little bit about why this was important to you. And I'm assuming you were thrilled about the way it turned out.
Yes, I am. It came out beautiful. So when I got the space, I was like, it's a huge, wall. And I said, let's do something nice. And I talked to Nicky, and he had the idea, and great idea. And it's beautiful. It looks so good. People loved it. And
so you knew Nicky beforehand. In other words, you helped to bring him in.
Yes,
so now we're gonna go ahead. How do you know him?
He's my customer.
There you go.
All the talk happened to haircut.
Nicky, your hair looks great. I have to tell you. So then let's get right to it. So here we go. The fifth. Now this is important not only to the Audubon Society but to all of us. I'm reading it right off the plaque that's on the front of it. 15 local birds threatened by climate change. I mean, we could list them all: the blue-headed vireo, the Blackburnian warbler, ruby-crowned kinglet, et cetera, et cetera. Nicky, for you, was this a difficult design to create, or is this something that you deal with all the time, and that is create pictures of birds?
I would say the answer is both. There were parts of it that were easy because I'm an artist that's always making art, and part of it that was difficult. And there was a lot of research that had to go into it. I had to figure out which are the local endangered birds. We actually, with the Audubon Society, made me aware that there's a distinction between endangered, like the legal term, and under threat. And so these birds are under threat, and we're trying to keep them from actually being endangered. So the plaque originally said 15 endangered birds, and then we changed it to 15 local birds threatened by
climate change. Listen, the third largest park in the city of New York is Van Cortlandt Park, which is not too far away. So I'm going to add my own editorial here. If you agree with the mission of this mural, then we've got to support Van Cortlandt Park, because that's where a lot of these birds have a better chance to live and survive, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Nicky, talk a little bit about the painting of it. Now, do you do murals generally? Do you work in this large canvas all the time, or was this really something kind of special for you?
This was very special and on many levels, but I have a history of mural painting. One of my collaborators for this mural was Nils Folke Anderson, and Nils and I used to make a living painting murals many, many years ago. And for many years, we actually painted murals all the time. But that's been years ago. I now make my living as an art educator. I teach at Riverdale Country School. I teach art. And so I only do murals once in a while when the stars align. You know, I'm not looking for mural projects usually. Mural projects are very challenging in many, many ways. So the only way that I would want to get involved in a mural project is when the stars all align, and there are a lot of stars that need to align. And this is a perfect example where the stars really did align beautifully so that we could do this project right.
Explain what the stars align. So that would be, number one, an organization that supports it. And also, we assume a social organization like the Audubon Society is doing it for the right reasons. So it's not like just, hey, make us a nice picture. It's like, really, let's do something.
The first star that needs to align is the actual site for the mural. Oh, yes. And that was Sokol Delaj, who was like, when, you know, I've been his client since before he moved to this new major upgrade, beautiful beauty salon of his, when he was in a small space on 238th Street. And so when he moved, the first star aligned because he said, check out this wall I have. Why don't you paint a mural on there? So that's star number one.
That was number one. I would love to have been there while you're sitting on the chair getting your hair cut and getting your hair dealt with when he said, oh, by the way, you know, well, that was an historic moment, somewhat of an historic moment. Sokol, let's just talk a little bit about how it turned out, because now when you open the door for your place and, of course, just look around the corner, you have this beautiful site. Just your impressions of it. How did it come out? What do you think?
I love it every day. Like between customers, I go outside and I enjoy it so much. I love nature and I love birds. And
there we go.
Yep. So it's so beautiful. I'm so proud of Nicky. Delivered exactly what he said. You know, at first I'm like, he showed me a picture, the idea of it. I was like, oh no, I don't think it's gonna come out like this. You know, it looks so good. And it came out exactly what he showed me, and I love it when people love it, and it's really nice.
Yeah, and it really enhances the neighborhood. Laura, I guess it goes to you to start talking about the actual effect on it for the business district. You're obviously concerned not only with this one block where KRVC's offices are, but all of Riverdale. But talk to me about what it does for a business district to have this kind of mural right there.
So yes, I must say that Sokol, we are proud to say that Sokol Delaj is part of our board here at KRVC.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that to me.
Yes. Yeah. And we were the recipient of a grant through New York City Small Business Services. And part of this grant was beautification. And so KRVC had pitched the mural to SBS. They loved it. So without their support, KRVC would not have been able to be part of this mural and to fund it on the level that we did. We recently just graduated a few weeks ago from our grant. And, you know, many different organizations had murals as well. And this was citywide, 5 boroughs, right. Members of the merchant organizing grants, they traveled to Riverdale to see this mural. And they're looking at it and they are just their breaths were taken away by this. When I was presenting it, there was just gasps in the audience. So it's really, really great and really special. I think this, you know, it beautifies our neighborhood for sure. The goal of beautification has been accomplished thanks to Nicky and his team, and also to Sokol for advocating for this mural from the beginning. Yeah. And I just think that it just makes the community thrive. Like I think people are proud to see this mural. And I think it's the first thing that I've seen in a long time because there's such divide right now. Mm-hmm. that people from different religions, different races, different
Oh,
backgrounds,
who could not like that? Yeah.
They come and they take pictures, and it's right outside my office door. So I'm constantly seeing this. And it's just the most beautiful thing that I think has come to Riverdale.
Yeah, you see it every time you walk out of your office. You're going to hate me for asking you this question, Laura. Does it like the lessons learned here make you say, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe I ought to find another wall space somewhere in the community"? And then Nikki's going, "Oh no!" Please.
I've already called. No, so KRVC gets so many calls and emails.
Really?
Put it in Spite and Dyeville. Put this in Woodlawn. Put this here. Put this there. And I just think it's a testament to the beauty of collaboration, right? Where one of us, obviously Nicky is a talented artist. Sokol is an entrepreneur. KRVC is an organization locally here that boosts the community. But I think collectively, when different entities come together, beauty is made. And
there you go. I have to mention we did another segment last week about the mural that was done over by the Friendly Fridge on Manhattan College Parkway. And the same kind of thing. They brought a lot of elements together, not exactly like this, and they got a mural done. Nicky, I guess I'm going to ask you a similar question. Like, what's next? What are you working on? Oh, and by the way, you're calling in from Europe somewhere?
Yeah, I'm in Switzerland right now. I'm in
Wow.
Zurich. Yeah, visiting my son. He's over there reading a book.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Sayan.
There you go. So from an artistic standpoint, another mural? You working on anything of interest?
I'm not working on another mural, but I'm working on a solo show.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, that's great. It's wonderful that you put your. There you go. We like love, and we like families, and so
yes, me too. So, and I guess right now I'm working on a show for a gallery of a bunch of huge drawings that I've been making for the last 2 years or so, which are kind of like murals too. But this was a huge challenge. We painted it over 8 days in a heat wave. Me, Nils Folke Anderson, Olubala Williams.
You got it done.
Team of 6 interns. We got it done.
There you go.
Wasn't easy.
We're going to run out of time. I just, Sokol, just give us the address of your great, wonderful place, and let's get people in there. And so go right ahead.
3545 Riverdale Avenue.
There you go. And right around the corner is the mural.
Yes, I want to thank Laura very much and KRVC and getting the community better and better. So
we are going to run out of time. So I'm just going to say, Laura, this is a guarantee. This is not the last time I'm going to call you and say, hey, let's do something cool on the Bronx Buzz.
And we will have a community ribbon cutting in September. So
in September. So we'll look for that. Maybe
cut that ribbon.
Yeah, maybe BronxNet will come out and cover it. That'd be wonderful.
We would love
Listen, Laura from KRVC, Sokol Delaj from Delaj Hair Studios, and Nicky Enright, thank you so much for joining us. And that will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We will say thank you also to Karen Yee from WNYC and Gothamist, who was with us in our first segment. And if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, I will be back next week. Good night.